So tort law has this both moral judgment as well as economic judgment. And I think when it comes to intentional torts, probably moral judgment maybe is a bit heavier weighted. When it comes to negligence, which is really figuring out what's reasonable behavior, and what's reasonable is, of course, circumstances dependent, we have a tort of trespass. And tort of trespass is defined as unconsented to unpermitted, unprivileged entry onto somebody else's land. And there's no mens rea there. So the classic case that I teach is where a person enters somebody else's land for very good reason. Number one, they think it's their land. In good faith, right? So they're not trying to steal anything, they do think it's their land. And number two, they don't just come there with like force and arms. They come there with a surveyor saying, look, I think it's my land, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm gonna invite a surveyor to exactly mark the line between me and my neighbor. And I'm gonna be actually careful. I don't want to mark the trees. So in case, they happen to be on my neighbor's property, I'm gonna be very, very careful to make sure and just lay down the line and so we can live in peace. Turns out that that person was wrong. And he entered what he thought was his land. He entered into a land of somebody else. And he didn't damage anything. Again, he didn't cut down the trees. He didn't even put a mark with a knife or anything like that. He was just there briefly with a surveyor to do a good thing. And the court said, doesn't matter. Entering into land of another is a wrong, and it's a compensable wrong. So in many ways, it's a moral judgment, right? So you're just entering into somebody else's property, and we can debate whether or not it's a correct moral judgment, whether there should be an excuse. I'm sorry, I was wrong, right? And now that I know, I won't do it again. But it's also, in some sense, an economic judgment. So, for example, that particular case arises in North Carolina, also mid-19th century. And I've been fortunate that even though I teach at the University of Baltimore, which is a Maryland state school, every so often I do have a person from North Carolina in my class, and I try to coax them into answering, why do you think the court is so adamant? In fact, the court has this weird phrase in that opinion. They say, the fact that the defendant thought the land was theirs makes it worse. Not better, it makes it worse. How could that be? Think about how disputes were solved in rural 19th century North Carolina, where judges may be far away. And eventually I guess I'm like, oh, with guns. I'm like, exactly. And what does the law want to prevent? Law wants to prevent these sort of solutions, right? Self-help, which is of course also moral judgment, but it's also economic, right? It's bad for people, it's bad for economy, it's bad for peace, it's bad for your neighbors, right? If people just start shooting anytime they have a disagreement. And I think when it comes to intentional torts, probably moral judgment maybe is a bit heavier weighted. When it comes to negligence, which is really figuring out what's reasonable behavior, and what's reasonable is, of course, circumstances dependent. Right? And again, so for example, it's the conversation I have with my students. They oftentimes begin, at least some of them, it's like, well, human life has infinite value. I say, does it though? I said, okay, I'll ask you. Imagine there's a sick boy out there, like in Johns Hopkins Hospital, and you can spend the entire yearly federal budget on that boy, making him better. Are you willing to do that? Realizing that you will have no money left for police, you have no money left for anybody else, you have no money left for fire department, you have no money left for national defense, for roads, etc. They're like, well, not that much. I'm like, aha, so it doesn't have infinite value, right? It has some value. And so the question is, what's reasonable to spend to treat that sick boy? What's reasonable to prevent that boy from falling ill in the first place, etc. So again, there's obviously some morality to it, but I think economic judgment is certainly heavily weighed in the considerations of negligence.